Hey, good morning, you guys. This is Robert Compton. I'm the Bureau of Indian Affairs Rangeland Management Specialist here for the Northwest region. Uh, I've been thanks for inviting me to share some of our some stuff that we're doing here in BIA. A lot of great things with projects as well as funding opportunities. So, I'm from the Eastern Shoshone Tribe from the Wind River Indian Reservation over in Wyoming. Been working here in the Northwest for about 23 years, up in Colville, about 2015 here in the Portland office. I'm a student I used the student system through SCEP to fund my degree for the University of Wyoming, which was through Haskell. Now it's called Pathways. So I'm a big advocate of trying to acquire students, whether it's high school and college students, to push them in the career of natural resources, whether it's through forestry, range, or fisheries. So if you're out there and you're looking for one of the students through the pathways, we're working partnered with those guys that maybe you want to have a pathway student down there with you guys. Let me know, and we could probably work with you on trying to get a SCEP student or a pathway student down with you. The only catch is that you got to make sure you probably provide some housing for those guys, or at least assist them with some housing costs. But the rest, they pay for their salary. So, but we could talk about that a little more down the road here. So. And the picture there on the left is the old trail boss. And that was a picture from Smoker Marchand that he did for us. And it kind of depicts that this is usually the trail boss overlooks the cattle in the range, but he depicted a lot of the natural resources, like you see a bear there, and you see fish inside that picture and a wolf. And it depicts that, hey, without one or the other, we can't do our job. So it's our partnering to look after the natural resources, look after our waters, and look after our grasses, to make sure everything works in coalition together. So thanks, Smoker, on that one, for sharing it, allowing us to use his photo. But I did throw the Bigfoot in there, so I kind of tweaked his drawing there. So can't have range without Bigfoot, I think. Let's see, how do we switch this next page here? I'm trying to switch the next thing here.
In the lower left of your PowerPoint screen, there might be little arrows.
Oh, there it is. There it is. I think I got it. There we go. I'm going to give you a little snapshot of the BIA. Talking about BIA is probably a whole week in itself, but I'm going to do a little snapshot of maybe a couple minutes on that one. There's our mission statement, is to work with the tribes to protect the resources, to do our judicial trust responsibilities to protect the tribes in all their environmental, economy, and responsibilities and all that perspective. As you notice, in the states, there's 12 regions. And in those 12 regions, we have about 56 million acres of Indian lands that we oversee and work with the tribes. There's about 574 federal recognized tribes at this time. Over in the Northwest, that's where we're at. We have 45 tribes here in the Northwest that we oversee, and 14 agencies. And that covers Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and the western part of Montana on the Flathead Reservation, and the southeast of Alaska, the Metlakatla Reserve. And with that perspective, we do have a government relationship with most of the tribes, whether it's through a Self-Determination Act, the 638 contracting, or the Office of Self-Governance compact. So we work with most of the tribes in that venue of those contracts. So, and those things alone, those government to government interactions, that's a whole nother course in itself. But like I said, we do work with those in those perspective with a 630 contract or a OSG compact. One of the BI also has many branches and moving wheels. One of them is the Division of Land Titles Records. And sometimes the tribes compact those services down at the agency level to interact, to make sure that they oversee the land status, the land ownerships, the boundaries, and stuff like that down at the agency level. And if the tribe can't do that, usually the region provides those services up here in the region. And I think Wendell mentioned before that it's pretty important to understand what tract of land are you working with, whether it's tribal or allotment or on fee land, because last thing you want to do is be spraying weeds on someone else's land. So you want to know what's tribal trust, and usually that's where the tribal government owns 100% of that tract of land. And those allotments, it's usually where a family or a family of interest holds those tracts. And sometimes the tribe owns those as well, because they're going through the buyback program due to the fact of that there's a high fractionization of those allotments, and we're trying to bring it back down to more manageable level. And then there's fee land, and just by seeing the fee land status, if you look at one of the tracks on the reservation, you can see a checkerboard, and you can see all those different ownership levels. And fee land was kind of established back in during the old General Allotment Act of 1887, or the Dawes Act. If you do the history, you can see some of the black eyes that the BI has acquired working with tribal governments at that time. And hopefully we have learned from our past to move better and make better decisions and working and building better relationships in the future. So those are very important to understand. So when you're working out there on the ground, you're not trespassing. Like I said, there was many branches of the BIA. So it's the brand and rangeland, and it covers the noxious weed eradication program. And at this time, there is no more funds underneath the noxious weed eradication program. So it's all non-reoccurring funds that we receive from central office. And all these projects that we submit out to the tribes, they're all competitive. So the tribes are competing for those funds. But the primary goal is to provide resource protection with these funds when we do receive them to the tribes, and to provide technical assistance if needed. Like I said, they're non-recurring dollars, and they're all competitive. We do also have utilized federal policies and codes. One of them was the American Indian Agricultural Resource Act. This is where it established that the tribes need to develop a ag plan or a management plan to set out their goals and objectives. So with that in mind, most of the tribes are slowly working on developing those ag plans and those weed plans. And we do have a pot of money. It's called the non-based funds that maybe could assist you if you don't have funds to cover those perspectives. And we can talk about that a little later in a few slides later about those funds. We also encourage the tribes to coordinate with the local, county, state weed boards with their treatments and with their management. It's much better to work together as a partner than to kind of constantly fight and argue about something that we could all work together on. You might need to create an MOU, memorandum of understanding, and that will help to work with staffing as well as use of equipment back and forth and cost sharing of funds. So also, Dan hit the nail right there on the head with the hammer. It was to talk about the extension programs. When I was up in Colville, we used WSU very extensively. Every spring, we had a spring workshop to do state calibration workshops, not just weed identifications, and anything that was pressing at the time. Even to the point, I think WSU was even helping some of our staff to work on practice exams for the state applicator license. So that was a big tool in our chest to help us on the educational side. So sound like Joey's the guy now. So make sure you reach out to Joey for those kind of services. Last year, for the funds, we can give you a little snapshot of what we funded last year. Last year, we actually received the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which increased our funding ability a lot more than we funded in 2021. So as you look, we have two pots of funds for the noxious weeds. One is geared towards the non-ag or the aquatics, that's the top one. And the second one is geared towards the terrestrial, the ag side of it, where we concentrate most of our treatments and management on the rangelands and out there. These two pots of funds are a little different. The first pot of funds is you don't have to have cost share. The second pot of funds were the number two, you have to have at least a minimum of 50% cost share to qualify for those funds. But last year, we awarded 17 tribes about 1.5 million to manage for our priorities, which is the northern pike, European green crab, the mussels, everything that's geared toward the side of it. So the side, number two, we funded 11 tribes, about 856,000. So a total of 28 tribes we awarded last year towards the invasive species of about 2.4 million. And part of my hat responsibilities too is to the endangered species. We awarded those guys 2.3 million for 23 tribes. And that hit northern spotted owl, Canadian lynx, and other endangered species on the reservation there. Number 4 is the non-based funds that we were talking about. We awarded 5 tribes last year, 450,000. And on the right side, you can see a management plan. I think that's Colville. I think Spokane had one there too. I think those are the same contractors. But the priority for those funds is if you don't have a management plan, like I said, those are where you apply for. And that usually went out earlier this year. And I think that money is going to be pretty soon. So if you have a management plan that needs to be done, that's where you apply for. If you need a range inventory or maybe a noxious weed survey or inventory, that's where you apply for those. If you have projects on the ground, that's maybe geared towards rangeland management for range infrastructure, fencing, springs, and so forth. Those are the monies that we can maybe help you with and make that happen. This year, 2023, we received, we haven't funded them yet, but number 1, the invasive species, the non-ag, we received 22 proposals and $3 million worth of proposals. That's how much it comes out to be. Compared to last year, I'm going to scoot back. Last year, we had 17 tribes, 1.5. This year, 22 tribes at 3 million. So this pot of money is still, we rank them here in the region, forward them to the central office, and those funds are still sitting on the central office table. And it looks like maybe first part of April or mid-April, they will let us know which project has been funded on that one. And I will let you guys know through an email you got funded, and I'm going to send the award letter out to you guys until the funds are actually in motion. If they hit the region, then you'll receive the award letter saying that the funds are here, and we're working on getting them out to you guys on the ground. And those funds were also geared towards northern pike, European green crab, and other thing that was aquatic.
4 minutes, Robert.
Okay, thank you. The second pot of money is the invasives for the torrential side. I just got wind of it that those are looking like they're going to be 100% funded. So they tribes that did submit their proposals for that fund will most likely get their $810,000 total. So that's in the work. We haven't seen nothing come down in writing yet. That was just in the wind what I heard last week. So it looks like it's a good promise that those guys will be funded. So this year we received 30 proposals from 30 tribes at $3.8 million. So we're seeing, we'll take a look at how that will be funded for the other ones. So endangered species, since I oversee that again, we received 24 proposals at 2.2 million. And that hasn't been funded yet. That'd be still in the same category as number 1, looking like mid-April, that we will know who got funded or not. Number 4, that looks like it has been funded. We're going to be working on the award letters. 3 proposals came in at $300,000. One of them was geared towards a range management plan and a noxious weed and a range inventory. And so I think we actually have some leftover funds for that one. So maybe if you're looking at a plan that needs to be updated or whatever, with me after this meeting, and we can probably talk about getting those funds allocated to you. And I think this next screen is kind of showing you who applied for out of those 22 projects. Kind of Coeur d'Alene submitted 2 projects, and Colville, Northern Pike, and I think they actually even included a wild horse project to try to help with some of their horse management issues that went on there. So that's pretty much a snapshot of who applied in their projects. And as for me, that's pretty much it. I have Ashton Harp. She's kind of the partner with me on the aquatic side of it because she's our Northwest fish biologist. So if you have any questions, there's our point of contact, and feel free to reach out to us anytime. Thank you.
That's awesome summary. Thank you so much, Robert. And you know, I'm sure a lot of the tribal communities on this call have already know about the opportunities, but if they don't, then
exactly,
that's a really good reason to follow up and stay in touch with Robert.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I do have a comment if there's a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Hey everyone, Justin Bush with the Washington Invasive Species Council, and just wanted to share a notification and an opportunity with you all today. So within the state of Washington, we're currently under an emergency order from Governor Jay Inslee around European green crab. And as part of that role, the Washington Invasive Species Council has worked with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, our lead state agency, to develop and submit federal appropriations requests, which is something that happens annually. We were able to put together a package that includes an $8 million federal appropriation request to the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs Northwestern Region Invasive Species Grant Program. And that would be directed to Northwestern Regional Invasive Species priorities. So we saw what Robert showed for the funding. This would be requesting $8 million to that pot. And if you are interested in supporting that, that has been submitted by our Department of Fish and Wildlife to Congress. I'd be happy to share some more information with you via email. And if you're interested in supporting this, definitely working through, your tribal government organization to reach out to Congress would be very much appreciated. And if you need assistance doing that, connect with me and I'll introduce you to Megan West, the federal liaison with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. So really appreciate the great work that BIA is doing and what you're doing, Robert, and would love to see you do more of it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, it sounds like if you want to, if you appreciate the funding that BIA has provided and Robert's group has provided, you might advocate for more funding by following the lead that Justin and the Fish and Wildlife Department have submitted as a request. So please follow up with that. Seems like a great way to increase resources in the Northwest for managing and monitoring invasive species. So I think next we're gonna hear from Clinton Campbell from USDA APHIS, and I think Clinton has indicated his internet wasn't working well, so he's called in, and I'm gonna share my screen. Is that right, Clinton?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm just loading your presentation now. Can you see the screen?
Not
Are
yet.
you- Okay.
Now I can. Okay, I'm ready to go. Okay, good morning. I'm Clinton Campbell with the USDA APHIS, and the local office that I'm in covers the state of Washington and also the state of Alaska. Next slide.
Is that okay?
Next slide. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay,
Let's see. Slide 3.
back up one.
Okay.
Slide 2.
Okay, I'm on slide 2.
Okay, well, okay, there we go. That's slide 2. Thank you. Yeah, today I'm going to talk about the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721, and how it relates to funding opportunities. And all these slides except one will have content that's taken directly out of the USDA APHIS website having to do with the Plant Protection Act. So the information is findable there too. But as it says here, the USDA APHIS provides funding for the Plant Pest and Disease Management and Disaster Prevention Program, which has a very long acronym, and also the National Clean Plant Network under the authority of the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. And I'll mostly be talking about the first part having to do with the plant pests and diseases. The National Clean Plant Network, in a large sense, is made up of facilities that do work on pest-related things, and there happens to be a facility that WSU has over in Prosser that pertains to that. So next slide, please. Okay. And for fiscal 2023, the money that is available and is in the process of being awarded now is as follows. There's approximately $70 million within the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. And the biggest share of it goes toward, as it says, pest detection, surveillance, and identification, threat mitigation, safeguarding nursery production, and responding to plant pest emergencies. And then at the bottom of that slide, it shows the entities that are able to pursue this kind of funding: universities, states, federal agencies, NGOs, nonprofits, tribal organizations, and it says that virtually all of the country is involved. Next slide. Okay, and out of that 70 million, as you see highlighted there in yellow, about 63 million is funding approximately 322 projects having to do with the plant pests and diseases. And then it says further on that about 13 million of that 63 million or so is also kind of earmarked for any rapid responses that might be needed. And then about 7.75 million is going to the National Clean Plant Network. Next slide. And some of the projects that are being funded this year include the following. The Northern Giant Hornet is receiving about $1 million here in the state of Washington. An insect called the box tree moth is also being funded at about $1 million. Stone fruit and orchard protection, about 1.2 million in 11 states. Forest pests, another 1.1 million for various things, usually things along the lines of trapping and, as it says, methods development and so on. The next bullet point, sudden oak death, which is a program that's been ongoing for 20 plus years now. There's about 600-some thousand across 15 states for surveys and other things regarding that particular plant disease. And then the last listing here, and again, these are just some of the project areas, has to do with solanaceous plants, including tomatoes, and a little over $250,000 there for that kind of work. We can go to the next slide, please. The Plant Protection Act Section 7721 is organized into 6 goal areas. And again, this is mostly going to pertain to, plant pest and disease work. And goal 1 is actually broken up into 2 areas. There's goal 1A and goal 1S. Goal 1A has to do with analyses. Goal 1S has to do with surveys. Goal 2 has to do with domestic inspections. Goal 3 has to do with increasing the ability to identify pests and related things. Goal 4 has to do with safeguarding nursery production. Goal 5 is for outreach and education. And goal 6 is enhancing mitigation and rapid response. And this is often seen in the form of, being able to do something about a pest. And I'll mention that most of the emphasis here will be on exotic pests that are, new to the United States or of concern as far as entering the United States. A lot of survey work is done to, look for things that, so far as we know, are not here yet. Okay, next slide, please. And this has to do with goal 1, which I mentioned is broken up into 2 parts. And the first part has to do with analyses. A good way to think of this is pathways, looking at how pests get in, or sometimes things that have changed that allow pests to get in. And so that's the best way to think of that part. Goal 1S has to do basically with standard and traditional surveys, trapping, visual inspections in fields and crops, and so on. Next slide, please. Goal 2, the example that's often used and shown in this graphic, has to do with canine detector dogs and so on that are used in different kinds of situations to do either inspections upon arrival or otherwise. So this particular area I don't think has had quite as many projects in it, so I'm a little less familiar with some of the work that's done in this particular area. We can go on to the next slide, please. Goal 3 has to do with pest identification and detection technology, and a couple good examples of local interest. Here in the state of Washington, the State Department of Agriculture has gotten funding for a number of years to allow it to do some specialization with regard to identifying exotic and other pest moths. that can show up. A lot of trapping is done for moths and so on, because of course the caterpillars are significant agricultural pests in many cases. And similarly in Oregon, there's been funding through this source available for a number of years to have an emphasis on beetle identification, given that beetles as a group are also significant pests that need lots of identification resources. Next slide, please. Goal 4 has to do with safeguarding nursery production, and this can take any number of forms. Sometimes I've seen examples where nonprofits are able to pull together interested parties to work on projects that will, improve best management practices and other things that will bring about essentially healthier plants for, not only planting but also trade. And then other aspects that I've seen have to do with, even things like soil steaming in nurseries to deal with the earlier mentioned Phytophthora ramorum pathogen. So there's any number of things that can take place under this particular goal. We can go on to the next slide, please. Goal number 5 gets a lot of use. It has to do with targeted outreach and education. Dan Fagerly has certainly operated in this particular area, and many others as well. And this has been a very valuable area, of course, to get out information on emerging pests and changes with regard to the pest complex and the kinds of things that we should all be looking for. Next slide, please. And goal 6 has to do with enhancing mitigation capabilities. And again, as I mentioned, it has a lot to do with responding to pest situations. And as it says here in the graphic, it can involve pest management tools, reducing adverse effects, and minimizing the spread of detected plant pests, which translated is sometimes, taking the necessary actions to eradicate a pest or similar. And so there's a lot of interest and utilization of this particular goal. Next slide, please. Again, looking at this current fiscal year, 2023, by goal area, what you'll see here is the goals 1 through 6, and on a national level, it shows essentially what the funding was through the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. And what you'll notice is that Goal 1S, having to do with surveys, is a highly funded area. It's shown there at about $14 million. And then Goal 6 is also a highly funded area. Again, $13+ million there. And I think traditionally what I've seen over the years is those particular areas get a lot of proposals, or as the term is used in the process, suggestions for funding. And so that has a lot to do with why those particular areas get a lot of the $69+ million and so on. And so it varies a little bit from year to year, but as you can see, some areas get simply more funding than others. And some of that's a function of how many suggestions or proposals are offered up, I'm sure. Okay, next slide, please.
Clinton, you have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
What we see here is, again, fiscal 2023, and this is the portion that was broken out. You can find all this information online, but this shows what was pertaining to funding for projects submitted by tribal nations. And you see that Wisconsin is represented a few places there, as is Idaho, and different kinds of projects and so on. You'll see that some is survey work, and it's virtually all survey work except for one of the items shown there. Next slide, please. And over the last 10 years or so, this is just a a collection of what I've gone through and found for Washington and Alaska, given that this office covers those two states. And this shows you the suggestions or proposals that have come in from those two states from tribal entities having to do with looking for funding from this particular section 7721. And some of these suggestions or proposals have been funded and some of them have not. And one of them there, the very first one shown, was funded for multiple years. So again, there's all these different goal areas and areas of interest. And so this is where, depending on the kind of work that's looking to be done, the different goal areas can be looked into when it comes time to submit a suggestion or a proposal. And again, on the website, if you just type in USDA PPA 7721 to do an internet search, you'll come up with this particular graphic and more having to do with how to find out more information. One of the things I'd call your attention to there in the graphic itself on the top right has to do with what's called the stakeholder registry. And this is something you can sign up for, and you'll get periodic messages from USDA talking about things that are up and coming, including when it's time to put in a suggestion or a proposal for Plant Protection Act 7721 funding if you're interested. And so that's one way to find out about it, or certainly you can contact me through any of the organizers of this session, and we can get you set up. So that's it. I have one more slide if there's questions, probably for later.